EVERGAOLs. Signified by the circular icon, these structures can be found at 6 points throughout the map, with each containing a boss whose HP and damage is reduced depending on how early you open them up, making them a viable source of runes and buffs all game round. But let's be honest here, that isn't the only reason. Hi boys, I'm Chris Crass. I make actually useful boss guides, and today I'm gonna bring you my biggest tips for all 17 EVERGAOL bosses in Nightreign. Note that I will only be covering the bosses that are associated with these icons, and not their night boss variant if any. Now, I will go from lowest to highest rarity, but to kick things off with a bang, here's how to casually dismantle a sword Crucible Knight. Is that shield bothering you? Well, simply hit it once and run to the right. This will bait out the shield bash, which you can strafe to land a couple of hits. This works with any weapon and kinda trivializes the point of the shield. Also, if he doesn't react, just keep attacking him until he does. From here, I want to direct you to their main 4-hit combo. This starts as the stomp, into a chop, before a spin and stop. For this combo, you only need to dodge the first 2 attacks before outspacing the third and jump punishing the 4th. Speaking of which, this guy's entire phase transition can also be jumped, from the phase transitioning stomp, to Crucible aspect wings, to the double tail swipe, which you can jump punish. Also, beware the single tail swipe. This move can appear from any angle, but can often catch you off guard when rolling to the side. This is because the knight's side or behind can often cancel certain combos, which can trigger the tail in response. Also, because almost every other move the knight has involves bro facing directly at you. Finally, I totally recommend parrying this boss, as their moveset is just full of parryable attacks, and that they only take 1 to go down. It may seem like a lot to learn at first, but it's much simpler than you think. Plus, once you get the hang of it, you start being able to win fights you have no business winning. Anyways, now that I have your attention, let's begin this video by talking about young Gaols. These are the goobers that will drop up to 22.5k runes and a blue dormant power, which will give you the choice between an extra 10k runes or a randomized buff, the effects of which I will display on screen. Also, heads up, a lot of these guys are very prone to being micro-staggered, so if you have anything like a greatsword or heavier, you'll probably have a much easier time with them. I also made this simple graph, which I hope is helpful. With that said, Beastly Brigade. Now, for multi-enemy boss fights like this, you often want to back off and wait for one of them to step forth. For this group, that's often the skilly misbegotten. These guys are known for the extremely long wind-ups, which can catch you off guard. To overcome this, look at their legs. If they wind up the axe without moving, they'll do the quick swipes, which can be jumped. But if they walk forwards while doing so, it's the really long version, which by the way, you can strafe by hugging the boss and circling in the direction of the axe. Also, they can be backstabbed, and be micro-staggered by a greatsword heavy attack and larger. Moving on, we have the flying guys. Now, we all know that jumping attacks can cause them to fall down, but since this can be triggered by even the lightest attacks, consider jumping light attacks. This is because they often come out faster and have a horizontal swing, reducing the chances of missing and allowing you to finish them off on the ground. Bloodhound Knight. Whenever you fight these guys, one combo always appears, being the scoop into spinning slam. Saying this attack appears frequently is an understatement. This can occur after dashing, after sidestepping, or by itself. Luckily for us though, this gives us a pretty difficult yet very useful strafe. Hear me out. Start off by rolling into the scoop. This should put you right up against the boss. From there, tightly circle to the left to have the rest of the attack narrowly miss you. Then, right before the blade touches the floor, you will be free to land a heavy attack. Note that the combo often falls out into 2 possible attacks depending on your positioning, but honestly they're more like free hits once you know about them. Anyways, this strafe's kinda crazy, as it actually lets you land heavier hits on the boss, and since the boss spams this move so much, this can stance break the boss super fast. Now let me tell ya, one good riposte can make a minute's difference. This alone is more than capable of cutting the fight in half, but here's 2 more. One is the claw drag into slam. By running away as soon as you see it, you can essentially outspace the entire thing, making for a free heal window or jump punish, which can also apply to the main combo. The other is this big vertical chop, which you can strafe by running to the side. This is a bit rarer than the others, but hey, even little things help. Crystalians. As I'm sure all of you know, before you deal any meaningful damage to the boss, you first need to stance break them. This rule applies to all damage types except strike damage, which can hurt them directly without the need of a stance break. Weapons that deal strike damage include fist weapons, whips, hammers, colossal weapons, and shields. These weapons also happen to deal more stance damage than most, so if you happen to have one lying around, feel free to use them as a nutcracker. And if you're in teams, you can use them to go around cracking open all three, helping out teammates that may struggle with stance damage, such as light weapon users or spellcasters. Also, once their stance broken, they can be macro staggered by literally anything. So feel free to spam R1 to hold them in place. Grave Warden Duelist. Welcome to Backstab Simulator, boys. This guy leaves himself so open after every swing that he might as well be begging for spine removal. You could practically get it off on just about any attack string, but if you want to be absolutely sure, I'd say the general rule of thumb is, if the hammer touches the floor, the coast is clear. Observe. Also, they have as much stance as a Skilly Misbegotten, and are extremely weak to status effects. Omen, basically Backstab Simulator 2.0. Same thing as the Duelist, but more interesting and takes a bit more effort. Heads up, if I don't specifically mention left or right, that means the strafe works either side. That said, here are the key attacks that can be dealt with by circling to the right. The poke into side chop, the side slash into overhead slam, the double vomit, and my favorite, the Wraith Explosion. The timing is a bit tight, but it's very consistent and also cancels the attack entirely. Alternatively, it can also be cancelled by micro staggering it. Moving on, if he does the jumping sword slam, run diagonally forwards to have the attack miss you and set up for the riposte. However, if he does the jumping back slam, run straight to the side, as this has a larger hitbox, but takes longer for the boss to recover. Intermission. Okay. Really quick, I just want to mention that if you guys see any footage of me fighting bosses in Raiders Remembrance Arena, it's because I'm using the Boss Arena mod. It's peak and I'll cover it later on in the video, but for now, just know that I use it to fight any boss I want, and that it saved me so much time filming. Anyways, yeah, Stoneskin Lords. At first glance, you might think these two have identical movesets, but you'd be wrong. There is actually enough difference between them that they each have their own strats and counters unique to them. Let's start off with the Curved Greatsword Wielder. This guy has two moves that can be jumped. One is the 360 slash, where you want to jump when the sword arm disappears from view. And the other is the double running slash. The first jump is mostly for show, but for the second one, time it when you notice the boss slow down before turning around. Moving on, you might recall the move where he sticks his sword into the ground and summons homing meteors. Well, simply roll into it, and that will cancel the move entirely, which leaves the boss open long enough for a heavy punish, or give you time to escape if you're being chased down. And finally, we have the scoop into drop strafe, where you roll into the scoop and circle to the right for the drop. A strafe that his partner also shares. Speaking of which, for the Greatsword Wielder, he has this unique poke into delayed pullback attack. For this move, you can choose to stick to his left and jump the attack, but I personally like to navigate to his right for a heavier punish. Also, it's a pretty decent heal opening. Totally didn't get caught off guard by this once and learned this strafe out of spite. Anyways, this guy also has a move where he sticks his sword into the ground. However, unlike his partner, rolling into it will trigger a grab attack. Now, you could just roll into it for 15% ult charge, but by super sprinting to the side, you can actually strafe it. Fun fact, in Elden Ring, they can be micro staggered with Greatsword R1s, but in Nightreign, they up the poise. Beastmen of Farum Azula. Let's approach this fight the same way we did for the Beastly Brigade. This time, the cleaver wielding Beastman is first. To start things off, when at range, Bro can do this lunging poke attack, which you can jump punish. From here, this guy's moveset is very backstabbable. And to help you out, here are 4 openings to look out for. After the one-handed double swing combo, after the two-handed double swing combo, after the spinny wombo combo, and the jumping weapon slam. Moving on to the lightning casters, note that they can be staggered by literally anything and that they tend to jump backwards when attacked, often after 2 hits. Knowing this, whenever the boss jumps backwards, don't immediately chase after it and watch what it does next, as it can often queue up an attack, which can catch you off guard. With that said, if they continue summoning single lightning strikes, go right in. If it does any melee attack, you can run backwards as soon as you see it and turn right back around to stun them with a running attack. If it does the multi-lightning summon, choose between getting that backstab or running away. Also, random fact, if any lightning touches water, it will do increased damage and cause a small AoE ripple, which can also damage its allies. So if you ever happen to encounter them at this specific EVERGAOL, you could use this to your advantage. Finally, for the Chakram Goobers, if they stand in place, you can avoid the projectiles by running straight forwards at mid-range. However, if it jumps backwards, that's when you want to roll. When you get close, the boss will hold up its shield, which you can break for riposte. It is also micro-staggered by literally anything, but unlike the others, it cannot hyper armor or jump backwards in response to R1 spam, even if it's shielded. So I say this with complete seriousness, spam R1 until you run out of stamina, and when you do, back off to outspace any close range attacks, or roll forwards if it throws a chakram. Then get right back to spamming. Nox Duo. F this fight, and f the sword stress in particular. Not you, you're a sweet angel in comparison. What irks me about this fight is that in trios, it's almost always trivial. Yet, if you just happen to be solo in the depths with no range or micro staggers, this one lady right here happens to be a huge pain in the ass for absolutely no reason. Anyways, let's see what I can do here. Starting with the sword stress. For one, you want to be really careful at close range, as she can attack so fast that she can hit you mid R1 chain, and that in the time of a single attack, she has time to both jump backwards and smack you. What I found to be the most consistent, or rather safest way of dealing with this, is by baiting out this double spin attack, which you can roll into for backstab punish. This attack mainly shows up as a follow-up, with 3 main attacks that combo into it, being the forward whip, side whip, and jumping slash, with each attack appearing at mid-range. So when you see it, make sure to anticipate the double spin. Then, once you do connect that backstab, assuming you can micro stagger her, make sure to hit her twice before she fully gets up. Basically, this is because the boss was only ever programmed to jump backwards and never forwards, which confuses her and lets you land a few more hits before she runs off. Since you'll be fishing for backstabs a lot, note that most range attacks the boss have can easily be blocked with almost any weapon, as for some reason, Nightreign decided to give everything 100% physical block, and that this whip does so little poise damage that unless you're blocking with a dagger, you can actually reliably guard them. That said, the only non-close range move you don't want to block is this specific up-down attack, where she raises her weapon before slamming it and pulling it back up. This will often break your guard, so instead, roll to the left, as you will still get hit if you roll to the right. Alright, let's move on. Now for the Priestess. Unlike their partner, this is literally a solved fight. I'm not kidding when I say, stand right in front of her at all times, and roll forwards on every attack. You see, the boss's close range combos are pretty simple to dodge, and they almost always end with this slow overhead swing, which by the way, rolling forwards conveniently puts you right next to her back. You see what I'm getting at? The boss does this move over and over again, basically handing you an infinite supply of backstabs. The only move preventing us from constantly rolling forwards is this jumping slam. Just kidding, this can be jumped point blank. So yeah. 90% of the time, stay breath smelling distance the entire fight, and roll forwards or jump accordingly. That said, here's some tips for that remaining 10%. For one, whenever she pulls out the shield, I genuinely think it's best to just back off and wait till she puts it down. This basically makes her moveset extremely close ranged, making it so that she can't hit you unless you're right next to her, and also that it doesn't seem to last that long if you ignore her. I don't know every move that triggers this, but occasionally it can occur as a follow-up whenever the weapon touches the floor. She also has a follow-up swing similar to the sword stress, which mainly occurs after the spinning double swing, extended slam, and this airborne slam, so keep that in mind. Though you can cancel it with a backstab if you're fast enough. Banished Knights. Let's start with tips that apply to all 3 variants before talking about them individually. First things first, I want to introduce you to the Storm Stomp. This attack is really inconsistent to dodge at close range due to its lingering hitbox, and also, it can follow up into different attacks, but will always contain at least one lunging attack that can be baited from range. This is important because all 3 variants have it, and boy do they love to use it. With that said, this fight can be approached 3 different ways depending on the amount of poise damage you do. 1. The R1 bait strat. Assuming you can micro stagger the boss with R1s, note that the boss tends to Storm Stomp in response after about 2 hits. This means you can't be greedy and just spam R1, but it also means we can use it to our advantage. By attacking them twice and backing off, this will bait out the Storm Stomp and the follow-up lunge, allowing you to get in a backstab, which also lets you set up 2 more hits and repeat the cycle. 2. The jump attack or heavy weapon strat. Remember when I said the boss storm stomps after 2 micro staggers? Well, for some apparent reason, this rule doesn't apply if your hits are heavy enough, meaning that using colossal weapons or spamming greatsword jumping attacks can semi-stun lock them. That said, you won't always have a Colossal, and that spamming jump attacks can lock you in place and eats up your stamina like crazy. Though it's still pretty useful at higher levels, where you have more stamina to burn, or for bullying the knights in the big castle. 3. No micro stagger strat, or light. Now, assuming you can't micro stagger them at all, that's fine. Keep a medium distance between you and the boss at all times, get in an attack or two whenever you see an opening, but never be greedy. They're still pretty damn Storm Stomp happy, so eventually, they'll lunge forward. There's also certain openings you can use to your advantage. For example, the Fire Breath, which is way more common without micro staggers, and also a good source of backstabs. If you're right next to them, you can just circle them like normal. But if you happen to be at mid-range, start by running hard to the right before making a sharp turn towards the front. As for the variant-specific punishes, I'll cover them right about now. For the dual sword wielder, a lot of his attacks and combos can easily be avoided by rolling once and walking backwards. I'm not saying this always works, but it removes like 80% of the fluff. His Storm Stomp also has 2 variants, the sideways spin, which you can easily roll into and punish, and the big jump, which will always follow up into this cheeky roll if close by. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Lastly, be careful whenever you're behind or at his side, as he will often do this backward spin attack. This can easily be avoided by rolling backwards, but just something to keep in mind. Also, I just found this out while recording, but apparently you can double jump this specific attack. I'm not sure how viable this is, but I just thought this was really funny. Is it consistent? Moving on, we have the halberd wielder, who's much more vulnerable than you may think. Starting with the running horizontal sweep, which you can roll into for free backstab. Not to be confused with the standing horizontal sweep, which will follow up into a poke, with the poke in question being a backstab punish. Same thing goes for the thrust into downward chop, and the downward chop into scoop. This guy also has 2 Storm Stomp variants. If the boss slows down mid-animation with its weapon pointing upwards, it's the lunging attack. But if the boss doesn't slow down at all, it's the spin attack, which you can back away from to wait out the animation. Finally, we have the shield guy. And well, I don't have too much to say about him. He sort of just feels like your typical knight with a shield. As soon as they drop it, their spine is yours. That said, the main tip I can give for you here is whenever he holds up his shield, hug him and circle to the right. This will bait him into doing this downward chop, which will miss you. There's also a chance it triggers the fire breath, but it's dealt with the same way. Fun fact, we all know that by spamming the roar attack using Executor's ult, we can basically stunlock and trivialize a bunch of enemies with lower poise. But something I don't recall nearly as many people mentioning is Guardian's Extended Whirlwind, which is unlocked using a relic effect. It may not have as much range as Executor's ult, but it can stunlock things that the roar can't, on top of being more accessible as it's tied to a character skill, which I find to be incredibly handy for fights such as the Nox Duo and Banished Knights. Also, yes, Guardian is viable in the depths. Here's your proof. Bang, bang, bang. But anyways, now with the little guys done, let's move on to the middle-aged jails. These guys drop a consistent 30k runes on top of a purple dormant power, which will give you the option to choose between 20k more runes or a randomized buff. If you searched up the pool on Fextra, this is what you'd find, which is completely wrong. Here's the actual pool. And this is why you don't always trust Fextra. Godskin Noble. The meatball to the Apostle spaghetti, this guy has quite a few things to talk about. Firstly, let's cover the strafes. I find the most common one to be the double slam. This one can either be strafed by rolling into the first slam and circling the boss for a heavy punish, or can be rolled backwards to set up for a jump punish. Note that the jump punish doesn't work point blank. Next, we have the backhand swing. By simply walking backwards, the entire attack will just miss you, allowing you to either get off a heal or set up a sneaky heavy attack. If he casts fireballs at you from mid-range, simply run directly at the boss to have the projectiles go completely over you. And finally, the big poke. For this one, simply super sprint to his side for a big punish. Now, while you're doing all this, I want to direct you to this fadeaway into poke attack. The Noble uses this attack a lot, as it's his go-to move for creating distance, and often appears once you've been in his face for too long. Moving on to phase 2, consider rolling into the phase transition move. This actually cancels the rolling attack and forces him to use the butt slam instead, which can be jumped assuming you're not point blank. I don't know why it does this, but it's pretty handy to keep him from stalling. Though let's say it does do the roll. Assuming you're the one it's locked onto, super sprint to have the initial roll miss you before walking forwards to the left. And from there, continue to hold down on that joystick, and eventually the Noble will stop. From here, we have the Mega Poke combo, and I just want to say, rolling backwards on this attack is practically a death sentence. So instead, roll diagonally forwards and get to his side. What's that? You want to learn how to dodge Noble's presence? Well, Finally, this boss has got to be top 5 most worth it to parry bosses in the entire game. I have done several challenge runs in the past, and parrying this guy borderline trivializes him, as practically every weapon-based attack he has can be parried, on top of going down in only one. Let me just emphasize this. Jump forward poke, first part of the feint, second part of the feint, either slam with a double slam, big poke, mega poke combo. Like, excluding his body and magic, it's literally everything. Great Spear Crucible Knight. This boss in particular has one overwhelming vulnerability, and it's that bro's entire moveset is extremely jumpable. This mainly includes the short swing and the wide swing. It may be only 2 attacks, but since they appear in almost every basic combo string, this allows you to constantly jump punish the boss. So much so that oftentimes, the only thing holding you back is your own stamina due to the sheer frequency of openings. Moving on, let's talk about phase 2. Now, just like the sword variant, the stomp is jumpable. As for the flying slam, this attack can be strafed by super sprinting directly under the boss, and can be used as a decent punish and heal window. Moving on to the Ash of War, there's a really tight strafe you can do where you unlock as soon as you see the boss do the move, and immediately circle to the left and punish this attack. Though this is a bit difficult, so alternatively, you can just unlock and super sprint past them. Also, I just figured out this while scripting, but apparently, you can also jump this. This should not be possible. The boss also gains a grab this phase, which kinda scares me, as it can appear near instant at times, especially at point blank. My advice, have your trigger finger ready at all times, and roll as soon as you hear the noise. Lastly, this boss is just as parryable as its counterpart, and thus, I totally recommend it, in both solos and in teams. Sword Crucible Knight. Oh wait, this one's already done. I guess if you made it this far into the video, consider liking and subscribing. It helps me feed my cat. Godskin Apostle. I know some crazy people out there. People who can basically no-roll this guy. I am not one of them. The way I like to fight this boss is by backing off and going in for a punish whenever I see one, often making use of running back and forth. This is because the Apostle can string together all sorts of attack chains, which can frame trap you at close range. However, by rolling backwards, most of these issues are easily dealt with, as a lot of this boss's combos are fairly close ranged and can be easily outspaced. Not to mention that it often causes the combo string to end prematurely. Now with that covered, let's talk about the strafes. Firstly, just like the Noble, you can run underneath the fireball attack. But unlike him, it shows up way more often. This attack most commonly appears after rolling backwards on this feint attack, but can also tend to show up after rolling backwards from this double spin. Next up is this forward fan. For this move, roll backwards as soon as you see the boss push his weapon forward. From there, walk backwards until you notice their legs stop moving, at which point you can charge up a heavy attack. We also have this thrust in the pull attack, which is jumpable, but can unfortunately trigger an instant follow-up, which for some reason does not trigger when you're doing a running attack or if you're behind. RIP jump punish. Moving on, we have this forward flip. This attack can appear at the end of a combo string or by itself. If you're close enough, this attack can be strafed by simply walking or running forward. That said, be aware that the positioning on this is a bit tight, and that in phase 2, the punish becomes smaller as it gains the ability to follow up. Speaking of phase 2 though, let's start off with the phase transition. As soon as you see it, back away to outspace the AoE, before immediately after, navigating to the right side of the boss's back. Staying right here will cause the entirety of this huge animation to completely miss you, giving you the largest punish window in the entire fight. I use this all the time, and whenever I do, the boss often doesn't stay alive for much longer. The most effective method of doing this is to lock off and run in from there, but alternatively, you can also just jump the first move for a smaller punish window. The rest of the new noodle moves honestly make this fight way easier than it was in phase 1. For example, the pin into spin move. Simply back off to avoid the pin before hugging the boss as soon as he does the spin. By doing this, his blade will completely miss you, giving you a lovely punish window. There's also the extendo fan, which you can simply roll into to punish his exposed noodle flesh while he's stuck in animation. Quick tip, while doing this, I recommend briefly locking off, as not doing so can potentially lead to you missing your hits. Lastly, I found this pretty late into the script, but whenever the Apostle does this sort of delayed horizontal swing, you can actually double jump it for a pretty decent punish. Dragonkin Soldier. Starting off this fight, this guy will always begin with a roar, which gives you the perfect opportunity to wedge yourself in between his legs. Either side, this will basically put you into a moving blind spot, as the boss will try to turn around and hit you, unaware that every time it moves, you move with it, giving you a huge opening to heal, land heavy attacks, apply status, whatever. That said, don't get too comfortable, because after a certain point, it will eventually do 1 or 2 arm slams, or you can sometimes randomly slip out. But anyways, if he does the turnaround swing, simply roll into it. But if it straight up shoves its arm into the ground, back off, as the boss will unshove it from the ground, creating a massive AoE around it. That's it, you can use this time to go chip at its heel while he's doing this, as it's right outside of the AoE. Alright, now let's talk about fighting it from the front, because chances are, you won't always be behind him, especially in teams. First things first, we'll be doing this unlocked, cause we'll need the added flexibility for the tips moving forward. A great example of this is the lunging push into sideways claw drag. By rolling to the left on the first attack, you'll be positioned right next to the face, letting you sneak in some easy headshots before dodging the follow-up soon after. Also, for whatever reason, this attack can potentially cause animation loops assuming you don't get hit. Another attack that can appear at range is the reaching claw, where the boss reaches forward before dragging the claw back. For this attack, simply run underneath them to wail on their right thigh, or position yourself near the front to punish the head. Either way, the entire attack will completely miss you, giving you a free attack window. Now with the longer range attacks covered, let's get in a bit closer. Here, the boss can do this thing where it roars while lifting its arm, telegraphing a big arm slam, which you can jump in place to avoid. However, if you're right up against him, you can also use this to run right under his thigh and wedge yourself in between his legs mid-fight. You can do this exact thing with a bunch of different moves, but be aware that openings may vary depending on each move and which arm they decide to use, so do this at your own risk. One attack you can expect while doing this is the palm slam, which can be jumped and often appears whenever you're near his thigh. This attack usually comes in 2s, but I've seen it go up to 5. So keep that in mind. Moving on, if the boss does a big roar, similar to the one it does when you first open the jail, it is telegraphing its forward rush attack. If you're behind him, you have nothing to worry about. If you're right up against him, you can simply run under his left thigh. But if you're further away, I recommend backing off until after it does 2 arm attacks and rolling diagonally forward, as I find this to be the most consistent. Doing any of these usually causes the combo to end early, but just in case it doesn't, simply super sprint underneath the boss's legs to avoid the belly flop. Lastly, this boss is infamously known for its seemingly inconsistent riposte, so me and my friend decided to do some research. For one, the riposte actually has quite a large hitbox. The thing is, you just have to stand on the right side of his face, as it doesn't like to trigger from his front or his left. As for the riposte window, using DS Animation Studio, we saw that it starts a bit before the head touches the ground, and that it lasts about 4.33 seconds before it's no longer ripostable. If you notice the head start to cackle, that's the indicator. That said, if you don't manage to get the riposte, no worries. At least you have the 30% damage increase and status multiplier from the headshot. Now, before we move on to the final segment, I just want to say to anyone who might think they're not good enough or not skilled enough to even try these tips from some comments, I want you to know that you can do it and that there's no shame in taking things one step at a time. This video in particular needed weeks just to discover, research, and consistency test every single tip, and not everyone has time to do that. So you can't just expect yourself to both memorize and digest all the information in a single watch. That's just crazy. If you're unsure, start small and practice one thing at a time. If you ever need a refresher, this video will always be here. Keep practicing, you got this. Anyways, let's move on to our last group of bosses. Finally, we have the old Gaols. These guys drop a consistent 60k runes on top of a golden dormant power. Unfortunately, besides the guaranteed option to get an extra 30k runes, the buff pool is identical to that of the middle-aged Gaol. Let's start off this segment by welcoming back our only recurring boss, the Deathrite Bird. I've covered this guy before in my field boss video, so I'll be summarizing a few things and covering some new ones. Firstly, you want to stick to the boss's crotch as much as you can, because doing so will cause the majority of the attacks to go right over you, leaving you a decently sized punish window. That said, be aware that certain attacks can still harm you from this angle. One such attack is this double peck, which you can punish by either hugging the boss's side or backing off and attacking the head. With these 2 tips alone, stance breaks are inevitable, and whenever that happens, you can sneak in an extra attack before riposting, and while the boss gets up, you can charge up another heavy which will connect with the boss's noggin right as it returns. Moving on, once you get to around 50% HP, Bro unlocks 3 super moves. If it does the homing projectiles, you can simply super sprint around it. If it does the spear rain, super sprint towards the face to have the projectiles miss you. As for the Ghost Flame Explosion, I usually save my ult just for this attack since I find it to be the most dangerous. But in the event that you don't have one, run away, and try to position yourself in a way that you can sort of see the left side of his thigh. This is because the ghost flames spread in a star-shaped pattern, and that the boss tends to turn to the nearest point when doing this attack. Now, I can't guarantee that this works 100% of the time, but of all the things I've tested, this seems to be the most consistent. Also, weirdly specific thing to note, whenever the boss does this jumping slam, it will leave behind a trail of ghost flame where the weapon landed, and for some reason, this trail will then go on to sort of track you for a short distance, often catching you off guard while you're focused on the boss. Moving on, in the last video, many of you were upset that I didn't talk about Deathrite's holy weakness. So you know what? Let's go all in. Most people know that holy is generally super effective against undead. However, what most people don't know is that strike damage is often just as effective, as both Tibia and Deathbirds share a negative 40% damage negation against both types. Now, let's talk about the various undead slaying Ashes of War. Let's go through them one by one. Sacred Order. This is a weapon buff that, when used, increases your damage output by 10%, but more importantly, causes the weapon it's on to do quadruple damage to undead mobs, and to any offhand weapon, doubles its damage against undead. Meaning, if you have this buff on any blue rarity item, you can activate the buff on your left hand and attack with your main weapon. That said, keep in mind that unequipping or two-handing another weapon will get rid of the buff. Shared Order. Unlike Sacred Order, this one's an aura buff, and thus can be applied to allies. It's definitely more useful in trios though, since it only buffs damage against undead by 50%. Though, at least the buff still works after you put it in your pocket. Last Rites. Unique to the Golden Epitaph, and basically Shared Order's cooler cousin, it does the same thing, but we're back to doing double damage against undead, on top of adding 15 holy damage to all melee armaments and bows. You can even switch weapons, and the buff still stacks. Oh my god, I just found out that Sacred Blade also does extra damage? What does Ishizaki have against undead mobs? Godskin Duo. I'm not sure if this is a hot take, but give me this fight over Banished Knights and Nox Duo any day. In my experience, these guys take just as much effort, or even less, for almost triple the amount of runes. But anyways, since we've already covered these guys individually, let's talk strategy. For one, I'd say killing off Noble first is a safe bet, because admittedly, Bro has a much larger hitbox, and cause his attacks don't span his entire body. Ideally, you'd have one teammate distract Skinny, while two others wail on Fatty. One dude will have the aggro, and the other will disintegrate his unguarded backside. I guess don't get them both to phase 2 at the same time. This one's kind of obvious, but you know. Anyways, if you're fighting these guys solo, here's my general battle strategy. Once again, we'll be focusing on the Noble first. Fight them like you usually do, but with a bit more emphasis on rolling backwards, as you want to see what the Apostle is doing in the background. While doing this, strategies that involve backing off, such as jumping the double slam, or backing out from the backhand, can be incredibly helpful. A good stance break can also go a long way, providing good damage and iframes, which in turn makes knowing how to parry this boss even more useful than it already was. Let's not forget about the Apostle, however. If Bro is further away, keep an open ear for any incoming fireballs that might catch you off guard. If both are further away, note that they have the tendency to both throw fireballs, either at the same time or in quick succession. I suspect it might also trigger as a heal punish, and if the Apostle gets really close while you're fighting the Noble, his attack of choice seems to be this forward flip. Lastly, here's their full resistance sheet, the main thing of note being that they're weak to slash damage and status effects across the board. They're strong against Holy and Fire, and that Noble is one of the few enemies in the entire game that resists strike damage. If you want an even more in-depth understanding of this fight, I'll link a video by my friend Olo, which talks about how the actions of one Godskin can directly influence the other. That's all I got for this segment though, we're moving on. Ancient Dragon. The way I see it, this boss can be fought two separate ways. Let's start with the way I recommend most people to go for, and that's from underneath, specifically by targeting the hind legs. Here, I want you to try and do this fight unlocked, as manually controlling the camera will help you adjust the threats throughout the fight, and that you'll have a better time aiming your hits on the dragon's slender legs. Now with that said, here is the moves you can expect to see in no specific order. Palm Slam into Lightning Shockwave. Here, the boss will slam the ground beneath its chest and follow up into a Lightning Shockwave, which you can jump. The timing on this is also pretty forgiving. Simply roll away from the initial AoE before jumping right back into it immediately afterwards. You can also jump the shockwaves from the Lightning Spears in the Night Boss variant, but I'll talk about that in another video. Turnaround Swing. Here, the boss will try to turn around and hit you with its forelimbs. This isn't limited to one specific attack, but generally, whenever this happens, you'll want to follow the direction of the hind legs and dodge the arm when it lands. Doing so will often cause the follow-up lightning to miss you, while also quickly getting back to his buns. Forward Fire Breath. Sometimes, the boss might fly away from you, and oftentimes, it triggers the Forward Fire Breath. For this attack, I just want to say, run forwards to the right. The way the boss's head is facing might suggest otherwise, but that's bait. Flying Fire Breath. Whenever the boss flies into the air, it'll breathe fire onto the ground. To deal with this, simply look around for the tail and follow it. The fire will fall behind you, and you'll be right up against the boss as it lands. Standing Fire Breath. Damn, lots of fire breaths, huh? Whenever the boss stands on its hind legs, navigate to the tail, specifically to the part where it bends. Here, you'll be completely free to just wail on the guy while it's stuck in that long animation. Quadruple wing flap. This one doesn't deal any damage, it's just kind of annoying. To deal with this, count to 3, and on the 4th flap, time your roll the moment the dragon's front paws touch the floor. Lightning Glaive. Whenever this happens, once again head towards the tail, where the glaive will miss you and the boss jumps backwards, at which point you can chase after him and attack his head as it lands. Wait, hold on, that's a lot of damage. This brings me to the second, more complicated way to fight this boss, and that's to fight it from the front. You see, unlike most bosses that take 30 to 50% extra damage to headshots, Ancient Dragons on the other hand, straight up receive double damage. And that's what we're after. Heads up though, this method in my opinion is way riskier than the other. The arms deal a ton of damage and often come with lightning after effects, which requires either spacing or double rolls to deal with. Also, you need to be constantly positioning yourself the correct distance for this strat to even work, which by the way, is whenever you're close enough that the tip of its wings are a bit off screen. Now with that said, the easiest attack to punish by far is the double bite. Simply roll or back away from the first bite before quickly punishing the second bite. Be a bit careful though, there's a small chance that the first bite instead follows up into an arm slap, which might catch you off guard. Moving on, we have the half combo punish. Telegraphed when the boss does a sideways arm slap, specifically with this arm, roll backwards twice to avoid the initial slam, and back off to avoid the follow-up arm drag. Then, as you notice the boss's mouth start to close, run in for the punish. The last common punishable attack we have is the Big Slam, when the boss stands up with both legs and slams down with a single palm, which you can punish after it lands. This way of fighting the boss can be further improved with playstyles that wield both close and ranged armaments, such as Iron Duchess, who can keep punishing the head even while it's out of reach. Fighting the boss from the front can also be good utility in trios, as the longer the boss is focused on one dude at the front, the more time the other two have to cripple its legs uninterrupted. Also, I just want to mention that I personally just roll to deal with the boss's arm and shockwaves, but some of my friends say they actually prefer using the super sprint, so maybe some of you guys might as well. Now with all of that said, I want to mention that you should never focus exclusively on the head. Whenever certain attacks show up, such as any of the fire breath attacks, don't waste your time just standing there, go in and punish that tail. Now ultimately, all of these tips won't actually do anything unless you put them into practice. And what better way to do so than with the Boss Arena mod. It's free by the way. Take a look at this. You pop in, and straight from the get-go, you can fight any boss in the game. Not only that, you can even select the multiplayer scaling, night scaling, different variants if any, depth, and even mutations. That's when they're red by the way. You can even test builds here, by selecting any weapon or buff of your choosing. This mod is genuinely so good, and I cannot recommend it enough to anyone who wants to master the game. I'll leave the download link in the description, alongside a few useful spreadsheets like enemy resistances and their drops/rewards. Lastly, before I end this video, I'm happy to announce that I now have a Ko-fi and Patreon page linked in the description. Big videos like this take me ages to make. Not only do I personally research every boss, I script, record, and edit every single thing, all the way down to those satisfying motion graphics. I love making big videos like this, but oftentimes, ad revenue just doesn't cut it. By supporting me, know that I'll be able to keep making videos just like this, and that you'll be helping me to keep doing what I love long term, which would mean the world to me. Anyways, I hope you all have a great day.